Ladies and gentlemen, you are now listening to Rewind That Radio. Rewind That Radio. You were listening to 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 Rewind That Radio.
Hey, what's up out there, everybody? This is your boy Putty. This is the sports edition of Let's Rewind That, or Rewind That Radio, excuse me. I've got my man Warren Shaw on again from Shaw Sports NBA, the Baseline podcast as well. You can find him on Twitter at Shaw Sports NBA. And we're going to be breaking down the Eastern Conference Finals just like before. Got 3 games in the books now. Game 4 tomorrow. So what's up, Warren? How you doing, man?
Doing great, man. Thanks so much for having me back. A lot's changed since, just a week or so ago. 3 games down in the books, and they've looked very different in some ways too. So I think maybe yours, but my predictions or feelings about the series has definitely been adjusted and altered some a little bit.
Well, I mean, just the fact that we saw Enos Cancer already, we blew that one out the window. Like, I mean, I didn't expect to see him really, but yeah, we've had 3 very interesting games, like you said. I think very different games. Obviously, the most recent one was just kind of a mollywhopping. Really, he never even were leading in that game. But I mean, just to go back, kind of that game 1 was just epic. That overtime game. Give me a little bit about that, Warren.
Yeah, that was. I mean, as a Celtics dude, that was a little tough to swallow. But as you alluded to, again, just the Heat showed their moxie, really and truly, to me. And I think, without jumping too far ahead, it's kind of the theme of the series that I thought was going to be the situation coming in anyway, where Miami's just, they don't really care. They can get down 10, 15, whatever the case may be. They don't really care. And they always feel like they have a chance with it because of their defense more than anything else. But yeah, man, going into OT in the way that they did, and all the contributions that I think, that Miami got in that first one, and then Boston again blowing a 14-point lead in the fourth quarter was just not. It's kind of indicative of what Boston has been doing kind of throughout the course of the playoffs, even in general. And that's my overall arching theme for Boston. Really, is that they kind of walk with an air of a team that's done something that they haven't done yet. In some ways. So like they work hard, and then they get up and they feel like, all right, well, now we've won the game, and realize that these are NBA players in a very unique situation, and a very good, even worse now for them in the conference finals, a very good Miami Heat team that is not going to ever give up.
Yeah, the Heat's kind of mantra, I guess, is beat the bubble more or less. So they've kind of adapted to it. They've, just the Heat culture in general, I think, feeds into the things that make a team good in this situation. Just sticking to your system and, just kind of doing your job more or less. Like, I mean, I hate to sound like Bill Belichick, but that's kind of what they do. So I just want, and personally, that game 1 really irritated me. Although the Heat won, it was a bad night for me because my power went out. And so I had to go to the bar and watch it. But I had Jimmy Butler over 20.5 points for a decent amount of credits. And he got to 20, even though I got overtime there. So I was not very happy there.
I'm sorry. The betting thing is always it's always a little tough. So you win, but you didn't win.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, if I could, pay for victories, I guess I would do that, although it might get a little expensive if we're going to get all the way to the finals.
Indeed.
So I was kind of looking at plus minuses. And in that first game, I thought that it was interesting that all 5 Heat starters were pluses. And again, in game 2, they were pluses also. Whereas in game 2 for Boston in particular, all 5 stars were minuses. And then you get to game 3, and it's like the box score totally changes. So I guess we can just go to game 3 now. I mean, everybody knows what happened those other ones. It's already been a few days since game 3. But I think the biggest factor is that we see the full Celtics squad with Gordon Hayward back on the floor, getting 30 minutes.
Yeah, that was huge. And I think we talked about it going into the series, just what his return means for the Celtics rotation. No Semi Ojeleye, no Romero Langford, like those guys don't play. Grant Williams actually did play and played well in the minutes that he did get in Game 3. So excuse me, not wanting to put the rookie out there. He's showing me up a little bit, but in general, Hayward, while not a sexy stat line, it's just one of those great overall floor games. Like I said, just being another guy in the rotation and a competent guy with an IQ. Who just kind of knows what to do out there, even in moving the ball against Miami zone. And that was the biggest thing, too. The Celtics just figured out ways to get into the paint. Jaylen Brown, I talked about it, same thing a couple weeks or so ago. Jaylen Brown was 16 for 57 from three. He only took 3 3-pointers in that one game. And in Game 3 there, just was relentless attacking the rim. Boston still had a little bit of let up because Miami's as good as they are, but it really was a kind of wire-to-wire win for the Celtics and nothing that they can feel excited about. I mean, they needed to win, right? I mean, the Heat sent them throwing chairs and cussing each other out, after the Game 2 loss. So, you have to find a way to reunite and get back there. But the Gordon Hayward situation was huge for Boston, and hopefully will continue to be for them throughout the course of the rest of the series.
Yeah, I mean, you look at that Hayward stat line. He's 2 for 7, 6 points, but he's got 5 boards, 4 assists, 3 steals, and a block. So, and, you alluded to that he knows what to do when he's on the floor. So just to have another highly intelligent basketball player that, knows your system, knows, has been there all season, obviously is a big help. Tatum had a big game. He was plus 23. But I kind of want to talk about what you predicted on our previous show was that Marcus Smart should be guarding Goran Dragic. And Goran Dragic was a minus 29 in Game 3 and just bottled up. Why didn't Brad Stevens do this sooner?
God only knows, in that aspect. It's like, you're always moving pieces around to try to figure it out. To me, obviously I'm right about some things. We're all going to be right about some things, wrong about some others. But that to me was an obvious matchup, especially with how Miami was playing coming into the series. Dragic was doing too much to get them and initiate offense for them. And I feel like you had to just disrupt that. Jimmy Butler and Bam are capable playmakers, but they're not natural playmakers in terms of wanting to do that throughout the course of the entire game, so to speak, where Dragic's handling the ball and that's his job. He's the point guard. So I think Smart was a smart move, no pun intended, to put on Dragic to begin with. And unfortunately, we didn't see that until Game 3. The other thing, too, is what I think Stevens was trying to figure out, where is he going to hide Walker? You can hide him on Jay Crowder very easily because Crowder's not going into the post. Jay Crowder's not taking you off the dribble. Jay Crowder's spotting up. He might do one dribble off the pick and roll, but he's not driving to the lane. You know what I mean? So I think that's where you can hide Kemba if you're Brad Stevens. Now they figure that part out, and Jaylen will just have to kind of man up, if you will, and play Jimmy Butler when he's out there.
Yeah, I just thought that. Obviously Boston controlled that game, but there were way too many sequences, especially when Hayward was on the floor, where Heat defense is just scrambling and had couldn't fight back. It almost looked like it was unfair because they were just moving the ball so well. And, again, kind of what we alluded to, that when you rely on guys like Tyler Hero and Duncan Robinson, then they have to play defense too. And if, there could be greater rotation. Obviously, Spo went to the zone, which, wasn't that big of a surprise because Toronto did it to Boston in the previous series. The Heat actually ran zone 20% of the time this season. Much more towards the later part of the year. And then, but, they run it. It's a different kind of zone. It's not Jim Boeheim's 2-3. You know what I mean?
No, indeed.
He's got the top, basically.
Right. Yeah. He puts them up top too. And I think even especially in I guess throughout the course of the series, really him using Derek Jones Jr., to utilize his length, in that zone at times, not for long stretches, because I'm not looking at the minutes in front of me. Jones is not playing 30 minutes a night or whatever, but in the spot minutes that he's getting, it was impactful, in that way, because it reminded me for Boston's standpoint of having to deal with Toronto. That's one of the things we talked about before as well, too. Just that level of length. Miami's length, they're fast, but they don't have that level of length and overall athleticism that Toronto had. Jones gives them that. So gives them that kind of that same element that Toronto was very easily flustered Boston with in the previous series. I thought that was a great move by Spo to kind of utilize that, not really so much rely on Olynyk, in some of those spots there, or to at least split the minutes a little bit between those two guys. And when you really wanted to get more defense out there that could be a little bit more rangy, Derrick Jones Jr. was out there in those times.
Absolutely. Okay, so I mean, Derrick Jones, although we saw that he not play well, Derrick Jones didn't play well in the last game. Actually, only had 8 minutes, but there's a lot of guys you can blame it on, and not Derrick Jones. As a Heat fan, just going forward, I mean, what the hell is Jimmy Butler doing? Like, what is going through this guy's brain? Like, go to the hoop, make something happen. It seems like they get in this mode where it's like the entire team just wants Duncan Robinson to shoot every time they go down the floor, and I do not get it. While he's a great shooter, make something happen, do something else.
Yeah, you're right there. I mean, Jimmy has to be responsive earlier. I mean, and that has been his mantra throughout the course of the season. It seemed like he's like, hey, I'm just gonna, when they need me is when they need me. And understanding that they may need him earlier is where he's got to be better at in terms of that leadership aspect. Again, not knocking what he's done for this Heat team in general, but he has the ability to force fouls more than anything else. So even if his shot is not falling rather, he's going to get fouled more than likely. He's just the way he moves. He's very crafty, especially on that spin dribble that he always does. I mean, it's coming. You still can't really stop it. And he up fakes, ball fakes, whatever the case be, up and unders, and then somebody's going to foul him. He's going to get to the line, and that was actually kind of what ended up happening early, in especially in game one. Jimmy Butler didn't start that fourth quarter, I remember specifically, but they got to the line tremendously, and that was able to cut the lead with no time coming up the clock. And I think Jimmy has the ability to do that, put the Celtics wings and guards in foul trouble early on, if he wants to. We don't have somebody who's going to lock him down per se. We can defend him, but we're not going to. Celtics can't lock him down, and I think Jimmy Butler just has to recognize that, and Spo has to just say, "Hey, man, go now," and the rest of his teammates as well too. I know, like you said, Robinson and Harrell, they want to get their shots off, but really, Jimmy's the dog. He's the dog, and he needed to go let the dog eat, as they say, bro.
So, I mean, yeah, it's so frustrating to watch as a Heat fan, just to know that he can do that he can go to the hoop and get contact pretty much at any time, end up at the basket, and end up at the free throw line. And I think what it does is, particularly because the Heat like falling down by double digits, is getting to the free throw line gives them a chance to slow the game down, slow the Celtics down, and score points. So especially in that scenario, like if the Heat continue to just keep chucking threes, and while Boston is playing well, then they're going to get run out of the gym. That's just, I don't know. That's what I think.
Yeah, I think so. It's going to be an unpopular opinion, definitely on your show here, South Florida based. I think Boston's been the better team throughout the course of the series. Like, haven't been able to find the stats like time of possession with the lead. Right. I think for the most part, that's been Boston like heavily favored, but Miami's played well enough in spurts. And played especially great defense. And then when those three start falling, it's an avalanche, and you just can't stop it once they get going. So to me, that's how they're up in this series. And obviously Bam's tremendous block, on Tatum's talk as well too. So, as a Celtics fan, I'm just nauseous. I've seen it 10 zillion times already. And, I'm probably see it more, especially if Miami does go on to ultimately win this series in general. So I think where Miami's at is that they Spo said something great, and this is kind of the point I wanted to make. Sorry. He wanted the Heat to sit with this for a little while. Mm-hmm. The fact that the Eastern Conference had to slow down so the West could catch up. So after a Boston win allows the Heat to sit with this for a while. And I know they're going to respond, and I think the Celtics are going to have to be ready for that. And I think Jimmy's going to be on the attack, or they'd be stunned, shocked, and amazed if he wasn't, from out the gate, driving and trying to get foul, or at least get to his spots on the floor, and then seeing if the other guys can kind of fill in otherwise. But one bright spot for you all is still, no matter what, is Tyler Herro is a madman. And, I'm about sick of that guy. Like, I was sick of OG Anunoby in the Toronto series. I am sick of Tyler Herro. Like, that guy just does not care.
Oh, yeah. My nephew's probably getting a jersey for Christmas.
I can see why.
All right. So it seems like me as a Heat fan, I'm very cautious to be very excited at this point, even though we're up 2-1. And you as a Celtics fan seem very distraught to be down 2-1 at this situation.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. It's just, I think it's kind of what I said earlier. I think the Celtics feel like they are the better and more talented team. I think Jimmy Butler even said something along that, probably playing a little bit of possum and gamemanship there as well too. But I think Boston truly believes that, and that level of arrogance cannot win you a series. You know what I mean? You have to go out there and prove it and lay the wood on them for 48 minutes. And even in the game 3, they had let-ups. They started to get lax and started to coast, and Miami was like, all right, hold up, and started to come back. And it was a 5-point game within the last minute and a half or whatever it was. So that's why it doesn't make me comfortable, as a Celtics fan in any way, shape, or form. Is the talent and capability there? Sure. Is the mindset there to do it and have that killer mentality throughout the course of a game for 48? And I don't know.
I guess what bothers me is that, right before game 3, I think actually they talked to Spo on the court before the game started, and he stressed that he wanted to see a 48-minute game because although the Heat to that point had only lost one game in this playoffs, they had not really played a complete game. They've been playing, when they play well, it's in a 8 to 10 minute spurt in game time, and they're unstoppable. But it bothers me that Spo specifically asked for that and didn't get it. And Jimmy Butler seems so disinterested at the end of the game. And, of course, before that game, you'd say, well, Boston's got to win 4 out of 5 games against the Heat to win the series. Like, it's not going to happen. But if Boston wins tomorrow night, I'm kind of crapping my pants over here. Like, I am not happy at all.
Yeah, I mean, that's the telltale sign, really and truly. If the Celtics don't get it done, I mean, it's a wrap one way or the other. It's still maybe, in that aspect, but it is, how these things go. It's like the roller coaster, the ebbs and flows. So I always say this. I don't remember who, somebody years ago said, I feel like Doug Collins on a broadcast. It was like, when you win, you feel like you're never going to lose again. And when you lose, you feel like you're never going to win again. That's the playoffs. Like, that really is the playoff, the shifts of emotion in a playoff series. So if Boston is able to capture game 4 and entire the series, then yeah, I mean, then it's any person's game, series after that, but I don't know. Like, I still think it's a pick 'em. Be still shocked if it doesn't go 7, assuming Boston wins tomorrow. But again, it's been a good series, I think, in general. And that's the thing too, like, even though Boston led wire to wire in game 3, Miami was able to come back and still make it close. So the point differential has been, this much, that margin. And to me, I think that's the sign of a good series. You can still have a good series that goes 5 or 6 games if those 5 or 6 games are competitive.
Well, and I think it helps also that we've seen the Heat come back from those double-digit deficits. So even in that game 3, when it's looking like it's very bleak, there's something in the back of your head. I mean, especially you as a Celtics fan, I imagine, thinking like, yo, we got to finish these guys off. We can't blow this.
Yeah. You want to, 20, you want it to be 30, and you're just not comfortable, anyway, especially with the way they're able to shoot the 3. Like, if it's, I don't know, whatever team out there, like, that doesn't have this level of shooters and people who just don't care about shooting the 3, like, have the green light, everybody has the light to shoot it. Then you're like, all right, you might feel a little less angsty. But because Miami has the ability to just really reel off like nine points in, 30 seconds, get a couple turnovers or whatever, like Hero or Duncan, they don't give a crap about getting a turnover and pulling up for 3 while Bam is down there on the block. He can be wide open. Now I'm shooting this 3 and see right. They're going to take their chances with it. And that's the level of confidence that they have. And even in some ways that Spo allows them to get away with, not in a negative way, but it's kind of almost what he's expecting those guys to do.
Yeah, just to look at it real quick. Granted, game 1 was overtime, but the Heat made 16 threes in that game, 16 for 36. Game 2, 14 for 43. Game 3, 12 for 44. So they've been the made 3-point hoops have been dropping. And I know the last game, Boston had 60 points in the paint, which the Heat did a great job of stopping Milwaukee, the number 1 team in points in the paint in the NBA in the previous series. So that's kind of what I'm looking at going forward here. And I think that, if Gordon Hayward wants to show up and score 20 points in a game, I think it's going to be very tough for the Heat to win.
Yeah, again, even if he gets into the teens with a decent percentage, that just gives Boston another weapon offensively that is just great for them. And he's still going to play good defense and contribute some of those other stats across the board as well, too. It is interesting because obviously the Celtics and Milwaukee are very 2 different animals. Milwaukee's very Giannis points in the paint based, and the Celtics are team points in the paint.
Yeah, the usage.
Yeah, so you can wall off kind of the one guy where the Celtics are moving the ball around, whipping it and cutting. And again, I can't say enough about what Jaylen Brown did in Game 3. He was determined. He's like, I'm going to the rack. F this. This is where I'm going. He put his head down and he drove and he slashed and whatever, and he did what he needed to do. So that to me was something I was just didn't expect. Something I knew he's capable of, but didn't think he'd actually buy into in the way that he did. He was completely committed, and that was great. And Kemba hit some great shots too. So if you're Miami, Boston, for the most part, throughout the course of the playoffs, haven't gotten all their guys to do something. And that Game 3, Tatum scored over 20, Jaylen Brown, Kemba, like everybody did something and played well and had high percentages offensively. And if you can get one of those guys to not do that, even with Gordon Hayward still trying to find his way back, then that puts you right back in this, in terms of being competitive and not necessarily having a wire-to-wire win for Boston.
Okay. So, obviously it goes without saying that Boston needs to win the next game. It really bothers me as a Heat fan if they don't, because I feel like the Heat has to put the same pressure on themselves almost to win this game, because going up 3-1 is a whole lot different than being 2-2. And if you just lost 2 games in a row and you'd only lost 1 game in the entire playoffs previous, I don't know, maybe the confidence starts to waver a little bit. All of a sudden you get a 3-game series, and it worries me personally.
Yeah. What's weird though, and the only counter to that, and I think, again, as you being a Heat guy, that makes perfect sense to me. And I'm looking at it not necessarily from the Celtics point of view, but even the temperament of Spo. Spo's a guy who's won championships. He's been here and whatever. His temperament is, while it's even keel, it's almost kind of like a F you. We're going to just outwork you. Spo is. Stevens is a good coach. He doesn't have that same fire. Like Spo has like kind of like a quiet fire to him that is there. But Stevens is so even keel that I don't know if the players rally around him in the same way that the Heat do in Spo. And I feel like they have guys that are, and again, I'm looking at maybe 2 or 3 guys specifically in Miami that really are killers. Like they just no sense of what the stakes are. It doesn't even matter. And Tatum and Brown and Marcus Smart, those guys are really, 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 really good. But I don't know if they have killer instincts yet. And that's what I'm waiting to see, really and truly. So one way or another, Boston has to win, and if they don't, then I think obviously we can tell where the series is going to go.
Right. I mean, there's only one way for that stuff to develop, that killer instinct you're talking about. It starts in Game 4, I would say.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so I think we attacked this pretty well leading up to the next few games here. I just wanted I got a quick alert here since we are talking basketball. The Bulls hired Billy Donovan.
Smashed him up.
Yeah. What do you think of that one?
Yeah, I haven't had time to dissect it. I saw it right before we came on, and I was like, well, I know Donovan was rumored to a couple of different jobs, Chicago being one of them. I think it's initially he might be a good fit. I think Zach LaVine's going to love him. I really do, and I think LaVine is a guy for me that doesn't quite get enough credit because of how his career started as a dunker, blah, 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's a pretty good basketball player in general and scorer and a guy who wants to be a leader. He and what's his name just didn't get along. Like it just didn't work. And they tried to, but I think Donovan is a guy who can probably buy into that, into those guys and get something out of them that they haven't got, especially after the job he did in OKC this year. I think those Bulls can look at what he did in OKC and say, all right, hey, that roster wasn't really supposed to do anything. Probably have a little bit more talent than they do. Let's see what we can do, with the new coach in tow.
All right. Well, great takes there, man. And so I'm just going to wrap up here. I would like to talk to you again, probably before the finals, if we can swing it. But just wrapping up here for Rewind That Radio. This is the sports edition with Putty. This is Warren Shaw. He is at Shaw Sports NBA, the Baseline podcast as well. So check him out, man. I appreciate you coming on, Warren. Thanks again.
Anytime, brother. We'll talk again soon, man.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are now listening to Rick Rewind That Radio. Rewind That Radio. You were listening to 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 Rewind That Radio.